guess I'd like to open the floor to some questions, if you have any, and I'm sure you must. This is a big range of people here.
Hi. When I worked up in Eureka in 2002 and 3, okay. When I worked up in Eureka in 2002 and 2003, because I had been a member of the co-op here since 1970, and I was really upset losing our co-op. I was so happy because there was a Eureka co-op and an Arcata co-op, and they're still there. And I was just wondering, are they still part of that system, and are there other ones in California now?
I think David's the man to answer that. He has the overview. There are some thriving co-ops around the state. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, of course, the Berkeley Co-op gave a lot of help to almost all of the new wave cooperatives that got started, either through advice or people coming and talking to them about what to do. What we have today in consumer cooperatives in California, which is, I think, what you're talking about there, interestingly enough, Maury Lipman, does people know Maury Lipman's name?
Yes.
Right, okay, right. Well, Maury Lipman is my father-in-law, stepfather-in-law, and his nephew is the manager of the Arcata Co-op today. Right, so. But anyhow, Arcata and Eureka now do over $30 million a year, have about 12,000 members. The Sacramento Co-op does about $30 million a year and has about 8,000 members. The Davis Food Co-op does about $19 million a year and has 8,000 to 10,000 members. Co-Opportunity does about $20 million down in Santa Monica. Briar Patch Co-op in Nevada City has grown tremendously and is now doing about $17 million a year. They are all still members of associated cooperatives. They all still are represented on the board. They all still are also on the board of the Twin Pines cooperatives. There are some other co-ops, some other consumer cooperatives in California, but I'm just sort of tying that back into who are the people who came out of associated cooperatives.
David, how do they do their wholesale? Where do they get their stuff? Okay, well, regretfully, every co-op wholesale in the country closed. And what has happened now is there is a buying organization called the National Cooperative Grocers Association, which represents 110 cooperatives throughout the country. It represents around about $700 million in buying capacity. And the National Cooperative Grocers Association has a staff, I think, of around about 40 people. And they do contracts with the supplier groups around the country. The main contract that we have is with what was once called Mountain People's Warehouse, which was based up in Nevada City, which has now become Unified Foods, I think. And so they are the main group, but all of the co-ops, well, most of the co-ops in the country are members and get a discount by being part of this cooperative purchasing power. Thank you. Other questions?
Just one over here.
A very quick one, and my voice is loud, so I don't need the microphone. I wonder if we could have the date or at least the year of that Berkeley Barb article.
December 7th.
And that's kind of a lesson to anybody that's involved in any kind of cooperative.
Who was that?
Leonard Levitt was his name. I got along with him, but any questions? Yes.
I don't know why I don't know this, but how did Berkeley Co-op fail? I mean, or did it fail?
Well, does anyone in the audience have a strong opinion on why we failed?
Oh, you bet.
Yes.
What role did the what might be called overexpansion play? That is, taking co-ops to Walnut Creek, to Marin, to San Francisco, to places where there was not the base that there was here.
However,
How important?
There was the bonds, wasn't it? Wasn't it all? It wasn't the purchase of bonds, stores.
My question is how important was that expansion in the failure?
Anyone you guys want to address that? The expansion issue?
When people have asked me that question, I mean, I don't know. I think the expansion was very important, a lot because we took on stores and took on all the employees without a commitment to the co-op ideal. And there's a book on why the co-op failed, and it's a whole bunch of things. I'd like to just sing a song. We had in this room, we had when they did an oral history with me, had it here, and it was a great event, and sang this song. It has nothing to do with the home ec program. When Don Rothenberg left the co-op, the education department had a party. We put together a tragical, comical play. And this song had to do with this manager. I mean, the co-op, one reason the co-op failed is we kept getting what we thought were good managers and they were awful. And they also didn't understand co-op. But he said, has to be a dress code, white shirts, ties. Also, all letters to the co-op news had to be positive. I mean, good. This song, you can sing the refrain. You gotta walk straight, talk straight, see straight, be straight. Write no letters to the news. I've got those uptight blues. You gotta stand straight, dress straight, write straight, smile straight. Better tie my shoes. I've got those uptight blues. You cannot innovate, create, demonstrate, nor cooperate. Think I'll take a snooze? I've got those uptight blues.
That was great, Betsy, and I remember that party too, where we were all screaming uptight blues. But I feel that one of the reasons for the cause of the demise of the co-op, there were many instances of covert and overt racism and discrimination against people of color and women by some of the managers of the stores acquired in the 1960s expansion. This attitude prevailed in the co-op for many years and had a demoralizing effect on the more previously inclusive atmosphere. And I use that quote in the exhibit.
Yeah, I'd like to add something that probably is a little more caustic, if you will. When we stopped receiving dividends, that was a notice. Okay, folks remember that. Okay, there were a couple other things that happened, practically speaking, and that came from the whole corporate structure thing, and it's probably one of the reasons why it would be very difficult to start a similar type co-op now. One was the idea of shrinkage. Shrinkage does not involve people outside the organization. Shrinkage involves theft by employees, okay? A major factor. I know for a fact there were a couple managers, when there were deliveries to their stores, there were things on the inventory that weren't on the truck. There's the other concept of things that fell off the truck, okay? And they were told to sign off on the inventory whether it was in the delivery or not. And they were told that by Central Avenue staff. and management people, okay? So, I mean, there's some serious things that happened at the time, and of course, these persons that were told this wanted to keep their jobs. So they did what they were told, okay? I do believe also, back to the whole idea of expansion, that had a lot to do with it. And again, it's just one of several factors as far as the demise of the co-op. And when it was coupled with it, folks will remember that as far as the city was concerned, the mayoral race wasn't more important than the race for the board of directors for the co-op, consumers co-op. I keep saying credit union because I spent so many years on the board of co-op credit union, which in effect, utility-wise, was an extension of the co-op movement. Okay, so the interest from the community kind of feathered out also because one, we weren't getting dividends, and not because folks expected to get rich from dividends, but it was a symbol of the success of the credit union. Here we go again. Okay. Of the, I guess, brain thing, of whatever that is. Okay, but at any rate, the bad news of introducing, and there were some things that kind of made me sensitive when I hear some accents that are foreign, and I don't mean foreign language. I'm talking about accents from in this country where they came from someplace else, okay? And the words just didn't fit with the actions. I mean, it just didn't fit. And of course, you try to be, quote, liberal or understanding or, quote, tolerant or whatever, and want to believe that this person is committed to the co-op movement, when in fact their actions just didn't fit with it, okay? And there's some other things, of course. Thank you.
I think,
comment. Yeah, I most of the time that I belonged to the co-op, I didn't live in Berkeley itself for about, after 63, I lived in San Francisco. And when they set up the store in San Francisco, I shopped there. This is talking in terms of expansion. I thought it was a loser to begin with. I don't know who planned it, who conceived it, the idea, but maybe they couldn't get a space anywhere else. It was put out near North Beach, an area that was developing. There was no new community, modern, apartments going up there. The people had no identity with this type of thing. It was hard to get to. I had a car, then I had to go all the way across town in a heavy traffic. The only parking was in a limited space garage on top of the building. And I thought this thing was a loser. If they could have gotten the Noe Valley or Coal Valley, where there was more of a progressive community, it might have worked. Maybe they couldn't get the financing to buy anything in that area. But I think the expansion, I think the Marin was a big mistake. They try to be a fancy co-op, have all kinds of goodies for the Marin up and coming middle class. And they had competition that probably outdid them in that respect.
Thank you. John, you wrote quite a good article on the demise, and you have something to say.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few things about that. First of all, many of the people who were working on the co-op wanted to change the world in many, many better ways. And to do that, they thought that they had to expand. Now we've got, the economic capitalist system is based upon expansion. That startup businesses have to constantly expand with the idea they're going to get to a certain point where they're more viable. And those two dynamics fed into each other with the co-op in a somewhat destructive way, in that and this took place whether the conservative faction there was like a seesaw between conservative factions on the board and progressive factions on the board, but no matter who was on the board, was in control of the board for this period of time, they continued with this philosophy of expansion. And it was related to associated cooperatives, and there was a certain inevitability about it. Associated cooperatives needed a certain amount of volume to be viable. And to have that volume, to achieve that volume, you had to have this constant expansion. And it resulted in a dynamic that was described by one person as a river 10 miles wide and 2 inches deep. That it didn't, a cooperative to work, to be a community cooperative, has to be in the community, has to come from the community. But they used all the resources from that Berkeley and Palo Alto put together to expand into areas which really knew nothing about cooperatives and and really didn't have much interest, and just treated it as a grocery store. And it was a dynamic that ultimately created a top-heavy organization, which the only thing it could do was collapse. And so right until the very end, Berkeley was the successor. It fell down to the 3 Berkeley stores, who were still very successful and would have been. They would be here today if they would have just taken on a philosophy of finding the appropriate size that works. That small is beautiful, and that's the way to change the world. The world is not going to change by developing these huge, thin organizations.
Are we done?
Yeah.
Oh, I see all kinds of hands raised. Can't we have 1 or 2 more questions? Pondy.
Yeah, on the subject we were talking about, co-ops originally came from the need of people in a coal mining city to control the food that was coming in, because the coal company owned everything and took money away from them very unjustly. What happened later with the food industry was that the margin of profit came down to about 0.5% and was based on how much the company could buy before they sold it to you. That feeling of that you had to control the food because you were going to be overcharged. You look around America today, everyone is fat. We get too much. No, this is really something that happened that made the co-op meaningless. The co-op had meaning at the time when it was necessary to protect people from the company store. At the time when the supermarkets spread all over, competing with one another and selling us cheaper and cheaper junk, we lost the meaning. Now, there's a lot of people did stupid things too, but against that background, you should forgive them all.
I'm being told that we have to stop. Can we have 1 more? All right, 1 more question.
This will be the last one.
This is really the last question.
In view of the fact that was mentioned together, there's co-ops elsewhere in the country. Why can't Berkeley have a co-op now? These other ones can thrive. Or are they trying?
I don't know. Does anyone have a theory on that?
What was the question?
If
it started here, right?
I would say that, I think I'll answer that one. I would say that people felt so burned. We tried to start a new co-op. People felt so exhausted in the struggle to keep it going that I think we just lost the will to do it, frankly. But we still have the Co-op Credit Union, which is doing quite well, and with 10,000 members and assets of 80-some million. So there's a legacy. We have a few panels here, if you have time to look at, that can talk more specifically about the legacy that remains in housing co-ops and the kind of co-op culture that is fertile ground for worker co-ops too. So anyway,
we start one where the elephant pharmacy was.
And also one of the old co-ops on Shattuck, where Andronico's is now, is going under.
I'll just have a go at answering that gentleman's question. Yeah, I know it's briefly. When I was back in Hanover last week, They're having a meeting in Massachusetts in about a month's time where there are 50 new cooperatives getting started. And one of the things that they're lacking, for the most part, is capital. Because they have, there are some places where we can all reach agreement here. They have the people, they have the interest in starting a cooperative that will serve their particular needs, and they're going off and doing it. But the biggest thing always is the capital. And that's one of the ways in which we are playing a role, is in furnishing some of that capital to have those things get started. Some are really small in towns that have no store at all. Some are in towns where there are stores, but people want to have natural foods. They want to have a store that they own. But Bob raised an important point, which is that history shows that when a co-op dies in a town, it takes another generation before people are willing to do it all over again, because a lot of dreams die when that co-op dies. And I think that we always have to really work hard on not letting those cooperatives die. So thank you all very much. I do have some books that I can sell here. Cooperation Works is about all of the new cooperatives starting in the United States. And Weavers of Dreams is about the history of the starting of the first cooperative in Rochdale. So I have some of those to sell. Yeah, John has a wonderful book too. His book is thicker.
And more expensive.
So on a per page basis, it's probably cheaper. All right.